Hello, Western Civilization 105 class. Welcome to week 4. And you guys have been working hard. But, you know, once we, when I grade everything for this week, you're going to see a chance to catch up or to pull back. Okay. As I've mentioned in some earlier announcements. Just a reminder for those of you for the exam, it doesn't have to be complicated. Just do what you're doing with the Sunday essays and expand on it. In other words, that's just I'm going over the same kind of thing. I do think, in a sense, the definitions essay is much more difficult, which I haven't been able to grade yet. I'm working on it. I'll work on those tomorrow. And so I just want to point out a few things. So first of all, I see how well you all are engaging with the material, and you know you you've been covering over this information. We went over a lot of things, but I hope at the very least, even if you're still a little bit confused about liberalism, conservatism, the way that they've changed over time, these terms, feminism, nationalism, Zionism, I hope you kind of now have a little grounding, a foundation in them. Okay, so I just thought I would point out a few things from these topics as we then kind of go into what you're going into for this week. So nationalism is not something that people think of as an ism often. You could argue that, let's say, Persians and Chinese being civilizations for thousands of years and always and having long rule empires, that they've always had a type of nationalism. You could make an argument for that, but the way we think of the nation state and nationalism now emerges very much out of this 19th century world of isms. Remember that a monarchy was multicultural. It was a sort of conglomerate of different peoples, and you had a domain, and you had people that were subjects of a regime, right? Of a monarchy or something along those lines. To then have some of those various linguistic cultural groups decide that they should only be ruled by people who are like them, who talk like them, who operate within their linguistic and cultural sphere. That is going to be a kind of unique thing that's going to break away from. It's going to be radical departure against that kind of system. And yet it creates its own set of complications that we see to this day. Nationalism, under this kind of understanding, can become very dark. We're going to see in World War II, right? We'll be talking about German nationalism. It then says, well, who really should be here? And you have minority groups. You have Jews and you have Roma people, for example, that even if they've been there for centuries, are going to kind of be seen as, well, they never were a part of this thing that was called Germany, the blood, land, and soil, and or basically everything's mixed together, but only a certain part of the society, the Germans, of course. And what's a German? Okay, right? But we always look at that time period kind of under that lens and forget that applies to so many other places, okay? And creates problems everywhere. Um, you could say it creates benefits too, but I'm saying World War I and World War II is going to be mainly about the issue of nationalism, not the issue of socialism and communism. Okay, let's make this very clear. That's the thing that really is and we don't think about it. You could say, oh well, I think that communism failed because of, or fascism failed, and fascism is going to be a part of the nationalist world. But like, what? You never talk about it and say, well, because of the World War One was based on this uncertainty of nationalism, I'm going to be an anti-nationalist because it failed. Or is that in Europe, there's a lot more people talking about that. Somewhat kind of the idea of the EU. It's complicated, and I'm just simply pointing out. I'm hoping that it's getting you to think about all of these topics more deeply, no matter what your feelings are about those things. Okay, and same with the Zionism thing. Just to make really clear, because we're going to be really having to talk. We're going to talk a lot about this come at the end of the semester. It is a form of Jewish nationalism, this idea of self-determination for Jewish people, kind of taking the logic of the nationalism that emerges out of the 19th century. The controversy that's going to occur over Zionism is that the land is full of people that are already there and have been there for centuries, and those are the Arabs of Palestine. And if you have a group of people who are saying, hey, we've been gone for 2,000 years, we're perpetually, we forever are the owners of this land, and sorry, you're going to have to make room for us based on our terms. That is the root of the Israel-Palestine conflict, not religion. Religion will complicate things. Religion gets a part of this. I'm not saying that, but that is the root of the conflict, the colliding of basically nationalist narratives. Who has a right to live in the land, and what's the presuppositions for that? And it's not a primordial battle that goes back to Isaac and Ishmael and all this other kind of nonsense that gets put in there. Those stories get put into it, especially later on. Okay, and I'm not saying that those are not a part of the story, but I'm simply saying fact. You look at the origins of the conflict, and it's based over this different view about what to do with who has a right to the land and what. And we'll talk more about that later. Okay, and feel free to contact me on that if you want to expand on have a bit more developed discussion. Okay, here's the other thing you're going to be seeing also in this week. We're going to learn about Belgium and colonization. Colonization is something that was mentioned by Herzl in Zionism, right? King Leopold of Belgium is going to go into the Congo and claim to save the people of Congo from the Arab Muslims and slavery, and is going to enslave the entire nation to himself and commit mass murder and mayhem. And in the middle of this, we're going to learn about Russia and the coming of the communist revolution. Now, this is all going to help make so many things make more sense to everybody. First of all, keep this in mind. Places like Belgium, places like Palestine, places, the non-Western world is going to be colonized in some way by the British, by the French, somebody from the West. That is going to be imposing taxation without representation on them. Okay, they're going to have some elites that, or some groups that collaborate with the empire at the expense of the majority. And this is the Western world that is claiming that human rights is a thing, that we have a better culture, that democracy and capitalism, of course, this is the best thing that humans can do, while we're shoving it on top of weaker nations who are being exploited. Russia then has a revolution and creates an alternative system at the moment. Whether it failed or not, that's not the point. Let's not get hung up on that for a moment. If you are a nationalist leader, if you're somebody who cares about your country and you live in Vietnam later, okay, and you want to be independent of French rule or of foreign rule, but it's the Western world that is imposing its rule on you, where would you go for an alternative system to get help to create an independent state? This is where Russia is going to come in, okay, down the road. And this complicated history that's going to be there. And right now, of course, we know that Ukraine and Russia have been having this long, terrible war. Okay. How do we make sense of this? And, so much of this history that we're covering right now is going to help us really understand all of the drama that's unfolding before us. Right now, this war with Iran is escalating. It's probably going to destroy the global economy right now. Like, this is a very severe, this is probably one of our most critically dangerous foreign policy moves that I can think of. And I'm not the only one saying this. And it's not being said by people who are Democrats opposed or anti, forever anti-Trumpers or whatever you want to call them. There's just sober-minded people who some even, look, this is really intense. And also, right now, Cuba is being starved. There's a lot of controversy about the role of the West in the world right now. What's happening in Gaza and Lebanon. These are things that we're going to be covering, but I can't stress enough that right now, paying attention to the world, but knowing this history, learning about this history that you're absorbing right now, is going to put you on ahead of the game. And these days, I feel like even like people who are highly educated and who are in power are not studying this stuff anymore. It's like, it's ridiculous. So that's all I'm going to say about that. All right. I wish you luck on getting everything turned in, and join me on Zoom meetings or contact me about anything. I hope you have a good week. We'll be in touch.